The last thing we're going to do is stick a limiter on it, just for good measure, because when we're working with balance and things like that, we don't want to end up making our bass drum too loud. And we'll just set the gain right there for now, or maybe a little bit less, and we'll just keep that there so that we don't accidentally clip our mixer with the bass drum. And so there you have it. That process is how you master all drums. Cymbals are a little bit different, but that's how you master kicks, snares, and toms. And I'll just do the snare really quickly so you can watch me. And then we'll move on to cymbals. So I'm selecting the snare. You can see it has no effects behind it. Let's put a spectrum. And look at the snare and see where our peak is. So right at 200 is where our peak of the snare is. So we'll add an auto filter. Put the hertz at 200. High pass filter. A little bit of a punch. See what that sounds like. Yep, perfect. Let's move spectrum over here. Now we add compression. Set the ratio to 3. Let's look at the threshold value. Right about there. Now adjust it by ear. Now I kind of like the snare with the tail on it, so I'm not going to put a gate effect on there. I'm just going to stick a limiter on it. And we'll call that good. Okay. Now let's put these into a effect rack. So when we do a bunch of audio effects in a row like this, we generally want to put them into an audio effect rack just so we can keep them all together. It's the same as a drum rack, except about effects. It keeps all of the effects in the same place, just like a drum rack keeps all of our drum samples in the same place. So select the first effect, press Shift, and select the last effect, and then Control G. And now you can see all of these effects are inside of this effect rack. I mean, if we click our list, you can see it says chain, and then we have all the effects in a chain right here. We can name this chain mastering. But don't worry about that too much. You just put it into effect rack, and if you click this, you can see all the effects inside. Now, I'm going to play the snare and bass without the effects, and then I'll play the snare and bass with the effects, and you can see just the amount of difference mastering has on your sounds. While you're doing it, it doesn't really seem like it'll do much, but after the fact, you can really tell the difference. So I'm just turning off these effect racks, and it turns off all of the effects inside of it. So let's listen. Now with, that's the snare. Now we'll turn on the bass drum. It's a pretty big difference. We did that kind of quickly, so it's not as good as it could be, but the more time you spend with it, the better your sounds are going to sound. You just keep doing things by ear, adjusting them until they sound good. Alright, let's add some cymbals. So we obviously don't have any cymbals in our drum rack right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our browser, and we're going to click on folder 1 right here. This should be the default Ableton Live sample library, and this is where I got the samples for this drum rack, and we're going to load some samples in. It's really simple. Just go to the cymbal folder, because we're looking for cymbals, and you're going to scroll through until you find one you like. So let's find a cymbal. That's pretty good. Let's just grab that one. And you're going to drag it over onto your pad with the other samples. Just like that. Bam. There's our crash. So let's put a crash on 1 and 3. Alright, let's listen to that drum loop. Oh, looks like I forgot that crash. Oh, yep. Let's do that. Okay. Let's listen to that. Now that crash sounds a little tinny and weird, but we'll fix that in the mastering, and we might do some balance things to it after the fact. So the first thing we're going to do, just like always, is come down here, and we're going to select our crash sample. See where it is already selected, highlighted, snare, it's up here, crash is right here. We're going to select our crash sample and put a spectrum on it. So go to your effects, scroll down or up, wherever your spectrum is. There it is. Stick it right here. And there we go. We'll listen to our sample, and we'll look at the waveform here in this window and see what frequencies we're not using. Okay, so we can see anything up below about 346 hertz isn't really being used all that much. So let's cut those out. We'll come up here and grab an auto filter. Type in 346, enter, and make sure you select high pass filter. There it is. Now for this one, we're not going to put a bump in the filter like we did with the snare and bass. The reason we do that is because right where that filter curves is the core of the drum. With a cymbal, there's not really a core like that. So we don't want to increase any frequencies and ruin the integrity of the cymbal sound. Okay, now we start to differ from drums even more. We're not going to put a compressor. What we're going to do instead is put an effect called a flanger, or flanger, depending on who you are, on top of the auto filter. Now, a flanger is traditionally a guitar effect, but right now we're going to use it to give the cymbal some motion and also widen it in the field of the music. You'll kind of understand what I mean. When we talk about pan and stereo and things like that, we're talking about the left to right, center and side perspective of the music. If something's panned hard left, it's on your left. If something pans hard right, it sounds like it's on your right. If something is panned stereo, it sounds bigger. And if it's panned mono, it sounds very small. So this flanger is going to widen the cymbal sound. And you'll hear what I mean. Select flanger, pull it on over. So you're right there. Now, this is a really finicky sound. And it's very, very heavy in the effect. So you're going to want to use very little of it. And let's play the sample now with the flanger on, and you'll hear exactly what the flanger does. It's very obvious. Obviously, we don't want that sound. So first thing we're going to do is turn down the dry wet to almost nothing, and we'll adjust that by ear. Also, you heard the sweeping, the pitched aspect of the flanger. That is controlled by this LFO section. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, and we'll go into that a lot more when we're in synthesis. But All you really need to know is that it turns knobs for you. And that's really it. It just turns knobs for you. And right now it's turning the knob of the pitch. So what we're going to do is turn down the amount of that. And we'll also turn down the rate, which is the speed at which it oscillates. Now let's listen to that and see what that sounds like. Now it almost sounds like it's not there. Let's turn it off and turn it on and see how much of a difference it makes. Almost no difference. So let's turn off the dry wet and see if we can make it sound better. I'm just going to mess with it and you can kind of hear. All right, I think it's pretty good. Let's listen to it without the flanger and then with and see how it changes the sound. That's very subtle. And if you aren't wearing headphones, then there's probably no way you can hear the difference. But it just widens the cymbal just a little bit. It stretches it across our plane of sound. And it's one of those things that if it wasn't there, you wouldn't notice it wasn't there. But when it is there, it makes a big difference in the overall impression of the drums. So that's why I use that. And we're going to slap a limiter on there, just for good measure, as always. And I'm going to turn that down, actually, because I don't like the snare so loud. The cymbal so loud. That's pretty good. It's not perfect, but that's a good starting point.